This episode is brought to you by Imagine Strength, your go-to for safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training equipment. Growing a successful high-intensity training business requires workout equipment that's not only high quality, but also intelligently designed to fit the unique needs of your studio. And that's where Imagine Strength comes in. Drawing on the wisdom of the legendary Arthur Jones, Imagine Strength has crafted a groundbreaking line of fitness equipment that's as affordable as it is efficient, giving your studio the upgrade it needs without breaking the bank. The team at Imagine Strength breathes HIIT. Their passion for high-intensity training shines through in their designs, which they've consistently refined and innovated for optimum effectiveness and user experience. From my personal experience at Rec, I can attest to the careful consideration and craftsmanship that goes into every single piece. My Imagine Strength workout was absolutely brutal, in a good way, of course. Now, what makes Imagine Strength truly stand out? They have innovative equipment tailored for the unique needs of HIIT studios, affordable and efficient designs, lowering the barriers to entry for a HIIT business, continuous innovation and refinement ensuring your studio stays ahead of the curve. Founder Jeff Turner and his team are dedicated to moving the HIIT industry forward and making strength training accessible to more people than ever before. Here's how you get started. Number 1, visit imaginestrength.com. Number 2, discuss your specific needs with the team. And number 3, select the equipment that will propel your business to the next level. Head to imaginestrength.com today and give your HIIT business the Imagine Strength edge. Be part of the HIIT revolution and see firsthand how their unique equipment can transform your studio's workout experience. Elevate your HIIT business with Imagine Strength. Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to High Intensity Business, your one-stop shop for elevating your HIIT business and fueling your passion for high-intensity training. Please leave a review on iTunes. This really helps the podcast grow and help more people learn about HIIT and build a HIIT business. And this is probably the one thing that's most effective right now for helping your favorite podcasts. So I'd really appreciate that. And get more clients for your high-intensity training business when you download our free anti-aging and strength training sales presentation. You can use this presentation for your next speaking engagement or client seminar to convert more leads and retain more clients. Download that now over at highintensitybusiness.com/free, FREE. You'll also get access to all of our free HIIT business resources, including a short PDF on how to attract great personal trainers, 10 tips to get more clients, and much, much more. Download again over at highintensitybusiness.com/free. This is episode 415. I'm really excited about this episode. The question we're going to attempt to answer is, what do you do when a client hits a progress plateau? And I guess this is relevant also to yourself if you're not a HIIT business owner, but a HIIT enthusiast for your own training. And today's guests to help me with this question are Discover Strength founder and CEO Luke Carlson and resistance exercise researcher Dr. James Fisher. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. Great to see you again.
Lawrence, thanks for having us. Yeah, thank you very much for having us, Lawrence.
You're very welcome. Excited about this one. So, as I said at the start of this, the main question we're looking to answer is what to do when a client hits a progress plateau. And I got a great email from a listener who shared this challenge with me and some potentially problematic and perhaps non-evidence-based solutions, which I think many of us believe and use. So I thought it'd be productive to get into it. This is obviously quite a nuanced topic, or very nuanced topic. And James, I guess your role here is to really try and share the available evidence to guide us through this. And Luke to discuss how we can use this evidence to inform our business and personal training operation and process. So one of the opening questions from this email was this. Most of my clients achieve almost linear improvement in strength on a weekly basis for the first 3 to 6 months and then plateau. I usually conclude that lack of progress is due to insufficient recovery. So I wanted to pause there first. And I'd love to just get your take on that, James, in terms of like thoughts on recovery and the evidence around that. And then Luke, feel free to comment after.
Well, yeah, thank you. I'm going to do what any good scientist does, and I'm going to take a step back for a second. I'm going to say, let's put a definition on plateau first, because let's be absolutely clear what we're talking about. So, presumably, we're defining this as a sort of a leveling off or a lack of progress in a given variable. And I think that the first thing that we should identify is that there are multiple potential variables. So this might be, from the sounds of it, a plateau in strength adaptations, strength increases. But we might also look at people trying to lose body fat, or we might also look at people trying to increase muscle mass, or even performance markers like a marathon time or things like that. And before we get into the crux, I just want to clarify, if we are looking at markers individually, that's great. I might solely track strength increases. But one of the things that we should also do is look at them in combination. So my strength might be at a plateau, but if my body fat carries on reducing, then overall there's a kind of a net performance improvement, right? Because I'm still able to lift the same weight at a lower body fat. If my strength is at a plateau and my body fat's going up, that's probably a net decrease. The other thing that I want to touch on really briefly before we get into answering the question, apologies, is that we've
Yeah.
got to remember, typically over time, we would see diminishing returns, or we will see decreasing results. People get weaker as they age. People increase body fat as they age. People lose muscle mass as they age. So we often look at a plateau and say that this is a really, you know, it's a bad thing, it's a negative thing, whatever it might be. But actually, a plateau over any prolonged period of time is a good thing because it means we're not decreasing in strength, we're not decreasing in muscle mass, we're not decreasing in marathon time, or increasing in marathon time, and so forth. So I think there's a couple of things worth kind of touching on there. And they're big factors based on what the client might be. So if you're training a 65-year-old woman or an 85-year-old man, and they've stopped making strength increases, well, that's not a bad thing if they're at a plateau. If they're at a plateau for 2 years, that's a win. We've got to be absolutely clear on that. So I think we've got to be sure we're talking about, we've defined the term and the variables that we're talking about first. Luke, do you have any comments around that?
Yeah, I do. I've been smiling the whole time because I literally knew there was in 100 out of 100 scenarios, the first words out of your mouth were going to be, we have to define plateau. I mean, I would have bet every penny I've ever owned that's how you're going to start. And that's how you started. And I wish I would have wrote that down or said that somehow, but I decided I always going to want to find plateau first. So totally agree. We have to talk about what we're talking about. And as I thought about this, I thought, well, is plateau essentially mean just like or plateau busting? Is it essentially the idea of just optimizing? Are we really just talking about optimizing on an ongoing basis? Because I think it's a myth that someone's going to have dramatic improvement for 6 months and then have a 3-month period where strength doesn't improve and hypertrophy doesn't improve and muscle architecture doesn't change. And then suddenly after that few month period, they go through another 18-month period of just rapid linear improvements. So I think that concept of a plateau is outdated. So James, I agree with everything you said. I think we have to understand, are we talking about body fat? Are we talking about strength increases, hypertrophy, muscle architecture changes, cardiovascular adaptations? And I'm excited to unpack all of those, but I love that you framed it up that way to start off with.
Thank you. So I think the next thing to go from there would be to say that we know that there are going to be diminishing returns. So we know somebody is going to make strength increases over a period of time, and then those strength increases are gradually going to decrease, and so forth. And weight loss might be quite pronounced early on and then become less and less if that's the variable we're looking at. So to some extent, a plateau, or what we perceive a plateau, is almost inevitable to some extent. And therefore, I think that there are 3 key things that we have to look at. Are we optimizing for any outcome variable for continued progress? And that is the training the right stimulus? Is the nutrition right for the adaptations that we desire? So whether that's weight loss, whether that's muscle mass increases, whether that's strength increases, and is the person getting sufficient rest? And by rest, we probably mean sleep and or stress-free time or stress-reduced time or so forth. And I think at that point, we can then start to unpack this a little bit and say, okay, so we've got a client who, and answering your clients, your listener's question, our clients made great strength increases over time, and now they have stopped making strength adaptations. So what can they do? Do they need more rest to continue making progress? My first thought would be, are they optimizing all of those 3 variables? because if they're not, adding more to any one of those variables isn't going to do any good. So if the training, if somebody's not getting enough rest, changing the training probably isn't going to be sufficient. If somebody's not doing the right training, changing the nutrition probably isn't going to do the job. And we both know that if you don't train and you don't eat right, you can sleep all you want, you're just not going to build muscle. So, I think that our key point, anytime anybody feels like they're at a plateau, is to look at those three variables and say, are we optimizing those variables? And at that point,
What is that? Sorry, nutrition, sleep, and training. Is that?
So I would say nutrition, rest, recovery, and stimulus. Yeah, and training is obviously the stimulus. Rest, recovery might be the time between training, but it might be the quality of sleep. Because somebody might say, oh, I go to sleep and I get 8 hours, but they get 8 hours of poor quality sleep because they travel between time zones, or they have young children, or whatever it might be. Other stress factors. Yeah, exactly, right? So other stress factors in our lives. So I think if we're not optimizing each of those three things, then a plateau, first of all, is more inevitable than it ever is going to be. But also, we're unlikely to be able to break that plateau if we haven't optimized the other variables. So I don't know if that aligns with kind of philosophies of you guys in your businesses, or I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, Luke, do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, James, we've been spending too much time together, or I've been influenced by you too much. But I, going into this, was kind of mentally had three big buckets, and one was training, one was recovery, and one was nutrition. And I'll just comment on recovery and nutrition because I think there's less components here, and my components might be simplified. I think the training components, I'm more excited about. For recovery, it's always three categories. It's sleep, and you said it exactly how I would word it. It's, are you in bed for 8 hours? Are you sleeping for 8 hours? Are you tracking it with a Whoop strap or a ring? How are you tracking it? So sleep is number one. Number two is other forms of exercise. So this is very anecdotal, but we see people that are struggling to make progress are almost always inserting other forms of exercise, generally not cardiovascular exercise. So generally, they're doing other types of exercise that they never identified as exercise, but it is resistance exercise. So
Can you give us some examples?
Really intensive yoga warrior sculpt class where they're basically strength training and they didn't realize it, or a Pilates class in between. So we almost always see an ability to add lean muscle if they're taking multiple classes like that. So number one was sleep. Number two is other forms of exercise that involve resistance. And then number three is just days of recovery in between. So the removal of the strength training stimulus. So, and I think if it's normally 2 to 3 days, or if it's 2 days of recovery, what happens if we increase it to 3 or 4 days of recovery? Those are always the three big buckets that we look at manipulating. If someone's not progressing, we say, how's your sleep? What other forms of exercise have you included? Usually that's the big culprit. And then can we insert one more day of recovery in between? Maybe you're not recovering from 2 workouts per week. And instead it needs to be, instead of 4 workouts in a 2-week period, it's, 3 workouts in a 2-week period. 15 years ago, if you'd asked me that would have been more of our go-to. It's very rare that someone can't recover from 2 strength training workouts. And 15 years ago, I did not think that was the case. I think people should drop down to once every 5 days, once every 7 days, maybe once every 10 days. Just anecdotally, I haven't seen that. So those are all of our recovery buckets. And then my nutrition buckets are pretty simple. It's, have you added creatine? Have you added protein, or you had 0.7 grams or 0.7 grams per pound of body weight up to a full gram per pound of body weight. So that's always number 2. And then number 3 is avoiding fasting. So we just think it's going to be really hard if you're using intermittent fasting approach to add lean muscle. And there's a heck of a lot of people fasting right now. So that's a quick way for us to encourage someone to break through quote unquote a plateau if they're currently fasting.
Just one clarification question on this, Luke. So you're saying that if one is, I know optimizing is a loaded word, but addressing, shall we say, all of those variables as best they can, that almost anyone can tolerate 2 full body workouts per week. Again, that includes the variable of inserting another recovery day, regardless of who they are, age, response to exercise, genetics.
Yeah. And my response there, or my comment there, is based on anecdotal, just
Yeah.
seeing hundreds of thousands of client sessions and then actually evidence also, right? So like, I just don't think we've seen any published research that says more recovery allows people to continue to increase muscle strength and muscle hypertrophy. And I just haven't read anything, and James can correct me, that would suggest that reducing frequency beyond twice per week optimizes strength or hypertrophy.
James, do you want to comment on that in terms of what the evidence supports on that side?
Yeah, totally. Well, first of all, I think Luke's absolutely right with those comments around other forms of training and so forth, and certainly getting nutrition right and protein intake right. The addition of creatine can be key. I tend to avoid looking down the path of any supplements. I think that's an easy out. Somebody can fall into the trap of taking, oh, I take like a whey protein and a creatine, but the rest of my nutrition's terrible. Or I don't sleep properly. That's kind of, oh, I can do that. That's an easy win. And it might be that that's an easy win, but it might be that that's not going to get the great returns. With regards to, yeah, I think most people probably can tolerate 2 workouts per week, 2 full body workouts per week. I think we should remember there's a spectrum that exists here. If we look at a typical bell-shaped curve, most people can tolerate 2 workouts per week. To the extreme, some people can possibly tolerate 4 or even 5 workouts a week or even more. And other people will probably struggle with 1 workout a week, but I would say they're extreme outliers, in the same way, very, very few people probably, I have no idea on the statistics. Let's arbitrarily say 1 in 100,000 could tolerate 4 or 5 full body workouts a week. 1 in 100,000 probably cannot tolerate, a workout once a week. I think the high intensity training approach, as Luke alluded to sort of 15 years ago, and historically has been, oh, add in more rest, add in more rest. And we fall into this trap of, oh, I'm not making progress with 2 workouts a week, I'll add in a rest day. Eventually that becomes 1 workout a week, I'll add in a rest day. That becomes 1 workout a fortnight, I'll add in more rest, 1 workout. If we carry on down that path, we're down to, well, today is my yearly workout, and I better have made progress since last year. And we both can see the lunacy in that, right? So it's not appropriate. It just starts to get ridiculous. And we've got to know that. I mean, Jeremy Linecki's group used the term about hypertrophy. Punning Buzz Lightyear, and said, adaptation is not to infinity and beyond. Adaptation is finite. We will stop making strength increases. Otherwise, people that have been training for 20 years are, bench pressing cars or trucks or, just ridiculous weight. They're not, they will plateau. So we have to know that there is going to be some kind of ceiling on adaptation. And that's not a bad thing. That's quite a nice thing to know. That's not to say that we shouldn't try to continue making progress, but it means we should be kind of aware that that's probably where we're going to go. That's probably where our journey is going to go. I definitely think there's scope to come back to the original question. I definitely think there's scope to say, is rest and recovery optimized? If somebody's doing 2 full body workouts a week, can we add in a day of rest and recovery? If we're asking, I mean, this is where the personal arises in personal training. We're asking these questions. Are you doing these other workouts? Are you sleeping right? Is your nutrition right? So on and so forth. If they're ticking all of these boxes honestly, then we might start to add in rest days. But then the next question might be, do you feel well recovered for this workout? And if they do, if they haven't got any soreness, if they do feel well recovered, if they aren't, having days of fasting and they're ready to train, then, it's quite likely that they are ready to train and they're good to go. And then we start to look at intricacies of plateau. So are they plateauing in key exercises? Are those exercises early in the workout? Are they, if you're doing an endurance, like let's call a resistance exercise an endurance task, because most people don't do a 1 rep max. It's maximal strength. Most people probably do a given load for a given number of repetitions. So loosely, there's a degree of endurance capacity to that. So last week you got 12 reps. This week you got 12 reps. Well, as soon as you're into that range, what we don't know is last week, did you really fail at 12? And this week you failed at and a 12.5? Or, this week, could we have moved the workout or that exercise earlier in the workout and you'd have got 14 reps or 15 reps or so forth. So, and this is where, of course, powerlifters will focus very specifically on the adaptation for 3 exercises. But in a strength training workout, we'll often say, okay, I did these 8, 10, 12 exercises, whatever it might be, in this order. Have I seen progress in all of those exercises or some of those exercises or any of those exercises? And I know, for example, Discover Strength do their, I don't know, do you still do the regular sort of strength testing where you do, I think it's 6 exercises?
7 exercises. Yeah.
7 exercises. Okay. That are quite quantifiable by range of motion and so forth. We've talked about this before. And really what we're looking for is any progress on any of those exercises, either by load or by reps, indicates that's not a plateau from where you were. You may have plateaued in your bench press or chest press, but you haven't plateaued in your overhead press. You may have plateaued in your leg press, but you haven't plateaued in your adductor. So I think that's the other key thing. When we look at a workout, we know that there's going to be a degree of variance in any given workout on any given day. I could go and do a workout right now and write down the exact time and the load and the exact repetitions and the exact weight lifted, the time I did the workout, the rest interval between exercises and so forth. And if I go back in the gym in 4 days' time, when I feel fully rested and recovered and do the same workout, I might get a rep less or a rep more on any given exercise, or I might get 5 or 10 seconds longer on any given exercise. And that, that's a natural variance in our adaptation, in our life, for want of a better term. So I think we have to be careful not to say, oh, I did 1 rep less, that's not progress, or I did this, exactly the same time in the load, or only 2 seconds longer time in the load, that's a plateau. That's kind of okay. Is there progress somewhere in that workout?
So kind of
Yeah,
what you go ahead, Luke. Yep.
I think it's worth mentioning. I mean, and James touched on it, is when we talk about twice per week and we cut it to more days of recovery. So maybe we go once every 5 days or once every 6 days. What are we really talking about? The frequency is really a function of volume, right? It's how much volume do we need in a given week? And if your frequency drops too low, it's not to the frequency or the lack of frequency that's hurting you in terms of strength hypertrophy. You're not going to get the same volume in, or the appropriate amount of volume. And I think this is probably, James, you correct me if you think I'm wrong, this is probably the biggest area or the largest departure of the quote unquote high intensity training community from really what the preponderance of evidence says. And the preponderance of evidence says, hey, we need a certain amount of volume. So I think as we make adjustments to that frequency, we reduce the frequency, we have 4 days of recovery in between. What's really happening? We're just reducing our volume, and that is absolutely hurting our opportunities to maximize or optimize hypertrophy and strength. James, can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think that there's certainly a volume requirement. Obviously, we tend to look at a volume spectrum, and there are people that propose high volume, whether that's multiple sets in a workout or multiple workouts per week, more than 2. But yeah, I think that's a completely fair comment. And it might be that rather than add, if our focus, let's say, is to increase upper body strength, and our metrics for upper body strength are our chest press and or our overhead press, then it might be that the additional exercises that we're adding to that workout are diminishing our ability to adapt to that given exercise, if that's the metric of focus, so it might be that we decrease volume of a given workout, but we actually can add in an additional workout per week. So instead of doing 2, 8, 10, 12 exercise workouts, we can reduce that down to 3, 6 exercise workouts where there's a focus on that given exercise in each workout. And therefore we're kind of maintaining our volume, of number of exercising sets per week.
Just a couple of points for clarity. For anyone tuning in who is not familiar with this way of training, we are obviously talking about high intensity training and training to muscular failure. So I'm thinking someone tunes into this who's like a higher volume person, kind of, "God, what are these guys talking about? Training twice a week or once a week?" Well, we're talking about training at a high level of intensity, training to failure, just so you're aware. One thing we haven't really touched on, or at least don't think I've heard, and when we're talking about the buckets that you notice, Luke and DS, in terms of like the main reasons why an individual is plateauing, it is stresses. Like, you and we're both dealing with clients who have very busy professional lives. Maybe they're flying a lot. They might have a young family that comes with a lot of stress, obviously demanding professional life and demanding job. Um, and the way I understand it is these stresses manifest themselves physiologically similar to exercise, right? So is that a problem that you see, Luke? And again, one thing I always love about talking to you, and I mentioned all our colleagues, is guys, like, you got to remember that DS doing everything that we're doing at scale. So they've got some really good like data that we can learn from. So I'm just curious what you make of that, and whether that's a factor for recovery too, those other stresses.
So I like to say yes, and I realize over time that it's pretty hard to separate someone who has all these life stresses with someone who's not getting adequate sleep, because they're so often linked. So I look at, we have seemingly 7 million high powered attorneys, and they're in the middle of a trial, and by the way, seemingly the busier the person is, the less likely they are to miss their workouts. Like, busy people just find a way to get in their workouts, which is amazing, which is the old adage in the workplace that if you want something done, give it to a busy person because they'll get it done, is true. These people are who they are for a reason. They just don't miss their workouts. And I can't tell you how many times an attorney has come in and said, "Hey, just so you know, we're in a stressful trial right now." And I'm like, okay, the stress is going to impact the workout. And I literally didn't sleep last night. I worked at the office all night long, didn't go to bed. So I pulled an all-nighter. And I thought, okay, I don't know if it's the stress or the lack of sleep. So often they're connected.
Today's episode is brought to you by Imagine Strength, your one-stop solution for safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training equipment. When it comes to high-intensity training, it's about the right workout machines intelligently designed for your studio. That's the specialty of Imagine Strength. Inspired by the legendary Arthur Jones, they've pioneered efficient and affordable fitness equipment perfectly crafted for your HIIT business. With a team that lives and breathes HIIT, Imagine Strength combines passion, innovation, and careful design into every piece of equipment, creating the perfect environment for an intense yet rewarding workout. So why choose Imagine Strength? Number one, they create innovative, tailor-made equipment for HIIT studios. Number two, they provide cost-efficient designs, making HIIT more accessible. And number three, they're committed to continuous innovation and refinement so your studio never falls behind. Elevate your HIIT business with a team at Imagine Strength. Visit imaginestrength.com to discuss your needs and select the gear that'll take your business to new heights. Be a part of the HIIT revolution with Imagine Strength and see how their equipment can transform your workout experience.
James can probably speak much more to the evidence on this and the idea that all stress is stress and experienced physiologically to a degree. But I just don't know, when we look at our clients day in and day out, workout in and workout out, I don't know how to separate. Is the culprit the sleep, or is the culprit the actual stress?
James, do you want to comment?
Yeah. So I think the key thing that we've got to recognize is stress stimulates catabolic hormones. So we're looking at a cortisol and an adrenal response. And fundamentally, they are not, at least not going to be able to optimize anabolic adaptations in strength or muscle mass or fat loss and so forth. So stress is going to be bad regardless. And hence why any stress, whether that's financial, whether that's, work related, whether that's family related, whether that's, I don't know, sitting in traffic, whatever it might be, or anxieties that stimulate the release of catabolic hormones are going to negatively impact adaptation or negatively impact acute exercise performance up to a certain point. But believe it or not, actually, maximal strength is very, very hard to negatively impact. Most people, even under fatigued conditions, can still produce the same amount of force for a single moment as they can when they're completely rested. it's when they get into a full workout or a full set of exercise that they just become, exhausted. And of course, as we get fatigued, we get decision fatigue as well. So we start to make poor food choices and so forth. So it's great to hear Luke say that people that are busy, still make time for their workout. Hopefully they also still make time for their sort of positive nutrition and so forth as well. But those things might be easier to slip, when you can go into a workout and walk through the door and walk through a workout and wave goodbye to, you know, that's probably quite possible to fit in, but making good lifestyle choices throughout the day might be more challenging. But yeah,
James, we should pause on that because there is, that's just not, there's really good evidence to say, really good research to say that if we're sleep deprived, which I think defined in most of the research is if we have less than 7 hours or less than 6 hours of sleep for more than 2 nights in a row, we absolutely make worse nutrition decisions. We select foods that are, calorically less dense, that they're higher in sugar and fat. And I started reading the papers that were talking about that. I thought, okay, that mirrors my own life. Like I know if I'm on multiple days of 5 hours of sleep, why is it that by 3 or 4 o'clock, I am just so tempted to just cave and make the worst nutrition decisions? And that is very, very evidence-based. So I just want to interject to say, I think we've always kind of all been aware of that, but there's good research to support that.
yeah.
So, guys, I think we've actually done a really good job of answering or addressing the solutions that a lot of our colleagues will use to try and address a plateau. So rather than get into each one, I'm just going to read them out, and then any further comments that you both have, I'd love to hear. So this listener who sent the email who said, this is kind of what I do when a client sees, hits a plateau and, they conclude that a lack of progress is due to insufficient recovery, which may be a incorrect assumption in the first place. But what they tend to do is these 3 things, and maybe you guys could guess what they are. The first thing is decreased workout frequency. So, for example, going from training once per week to once every 10 days, which obviously has problems with from a business perspective. Not that that's the most important thing, but it's just a fact, I guess. And then also with regard to adherence, which James, you've already touched on about how the workout recovery can keep getting more extended and that results in poor adherence. The next thing is they resort to decreasing workout volume, performing fewer exercises to try and help with recovery. And the last one would be to create a body part split. So maybe maintaining frequency, but doing like 2 or 3-way split type routines, separating upper from lower body, etc. So I've got other questions I want to get into, but I'd love to hear. I feel like we've kind of almost answered and kind of challenged those solutions in what we already spoke about. But I'm curious what you guys think. And Luke, start with yourself.
So Lawrence, I'll comment on what you said, but then I'll just kind of go through our mental list of someone's, at a plateau, what we would consider. The one that's the most confusing, we commented on, I don't know if you need less frequency or more days of recovery in between. I definitely don't think you should reduce the volume. And the idea of the split, I never really understood that. I don't know if that came from Mike Menser and it came from Doug McGuff. Doug McGuff was influenced by Menser, but I never necessarily understood that unless the split was to actually increase volume. Even Brown Schoenfeld would say, I don't care if you train twice a week or once a week or 4 days a week. I just want you to be able to get enough volume in. And it's just more practical for most people to train 3 times a week to get that amount of volume in. So that's, again, I'm restating what we said before, but volume seems to be, the mediator. So when we think about training, the first question is, are they actually getting to true muscle failure? And I think the biggest limitation to getting true muscle failure among high intensity training colleagues is they are having a client stop when form breaks down and there's actually a lot more in the tank, and they're terminating the sets far too early because of the smallest deviation in form. That might be controversial, but that's my observation. Intensity is and form go hand in hand. Intensity is slightly more important than absolute perfect form. If your left leg moves 2 inches, or if your nostril moved a little bit, that's okay. Like in my opinion, that's okay. If your face isn't relaxed, I would rather have your face not be relaxed and you to get 2 more repetitions. So number 1 is intensity. Number 2 is absolutely do more than the big five. If someone's plateauing, I'm going to increase their volume because I think we're going to plateau if we're just in a big five forever. Then I think we start thinking about advanced techniques, and whether or not you define this as an advanced technique, I think it's the first consideration. It's the strongest research support for, are we doing some type of eccentric work? So that's at least, is there a negative? Is there eccentric only work? Is there eccentric emphasized work? But I would absolutely always consider more eccentric work, more creative eccentric work. Then it's the other classic advanced techniques, forced reps, rest pause, pre-exhaust, things like that. And then the other ones are just a little bit, less evidence around, but change in load. So if you're plateaued doing 12 reps, go through a cycle of where you're just failing at 6 reps or 5 reps, much heavier load. Or go the other way, aim for 20 reps or 25 reps for a long period of time. We go back to the standardized test where the goal is 12 reps on 7 exercises, and we drastically change what the exercise looks like for the 10 weeks leading up to that test in a heavier load or a lighter load. Sometimes we'll see some additional adaptation. Okay. So variation in general, all those things are probably variation. I think one of the variations we can make is change the speed of movement, right? If you only use a 10-10 speed, consider a 2-4 speed. I mean, I'm an advocate of a 2-4 speed, a 10-10 speed, a 5-5-5 speed, a 30-30 speed, a 60-60 speed, changing the speed of movement. And I do think there's probably a role, and James can speak to this more, his lab and Koch have done some research on this, is periodic layoffs. And I just don't know enough about periodic layoffs. I know everyone's written about periodic layoffs and talked about periodic layoffs. Like, hey, in your 52-week training year, are you taking a 14-day period where you are intentionally not training? I just can't comment on that. I think maybe it's because selfishly, I'm too anal to want to take a periodic layoff. I'm just looking forward to my workout so much. So we probably don't go to that card as much. It's definitely been speculated on. But the rest of what I said, I mean, this is the part that's interesting to me, is how do we actually change the stimulus? How do we change the workout? And I just went through things that we normally look at. And I'm well aware that there's not a ton of research to support any of those things being efficacious. I think the strongest research support is there a sufficient eccentric work, and is there sufficient volume, which for a high intensity training practitioner, that usually means let's get away from a big five and start increasing volume as well.
I've never personally understood when our colleagues encourage layoffs with clients either. I often think that's a terrible idea because the clients get enough layoffs, right? Like they miss sessions, and so their layoffs are organic. So I never think we should ever encourage a layoff, right?
Yeah, our clients are getting that. I think a layoff is probably more purposeful, and James should comment on this, for a competitive power lifter who, has much higher volume, much higher frequency. And the layoff is probably more for like joint health or, that type of recovery rather than actual, muscle tissue. But I'm out of my area of expertise. James can comment on that.
James, you got a thought on that?
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything Luke said. I think that the research is quite what limited research there is quite questionable over detraining periods. I know it's quite a growing area, and especially by one of my old PhD students, Pack, or Dr. Pack, because he did earn his PhD. So I think, I tend to think layoffs can happen quite organically. I think, we hit Christmas period and people will take a layoff. We hit the summer period where we might take a holiday or vacation, whatever it might be. We might travel more. We might take time away. And it happens naturally as a product of busy lifestyles. So I tend not to feel like there's there's a necessity for a deliberate kind of time away from training. But some people might feel there is, and they might feel that they benefit from it. And as a business owner, I probably would never advocate that. And I probably would never advocate really reducing frequency below once a week. I think you fall into a really slippery slope. Imagine that your client does make progress, falling to like once every 10 days or once a fortnight. Well, surely not a good way to run a business. So, I realize that obviously we want the best for our clients, but we also want to be in business, or you guys want to be in business. So, what I would speak to out of the 3 adaptations that you said is, first of all, I totally agree with Luke over volume. I think, well, get away from the big five. If there are people listening to this podcast or watching this podcast who are doing the big five once every 7 days, once every 10 days, and their clients stop making progress, there's a reasonable likelihood that those big five are not of sufficient stimulus or of sufficient volume for progress. So going down the path of more rest, I think, is probably not going to be good. Reducing volume out of a big five workout to go to what, a giant three? I don't know what that becomes. I think that we fall into this trap of less is better, and I don't think that's the case. The interesting one out of the three that you said, and I thought this is the one Luke was going to focus more on, was the split routines. To me, that's the opposite to more rest and recovery. If you're inclined to give somebody an extra day of recovery, why would you give them double the workouts? Our body doesn't recover. If I do an upper body workout, whilst that's great for my upper body because it's the stimulus, my body doesn't recover. My body doesn't direct all recovery to my upper body or all stress to my upper
I
body.
see.
There's a central fatigue attached to that. And then I'm adding in a lower body workout, maybe the following day or 2 days later. So instead of doing arbitrarily, let's say instead of doing two full body workouts per week, I'm doing 4 half body workouts. If I do an upper lower split over a 7-day period, well, I would say that's more fatiguing than it is to do.
Yeah, I think, James, sorry, one thing. I think what they meant, let me just have a quick scan of this, is to do, if it's training still once a week. So 1 week they'll do lower body, the next week they'll do an upper body, and so on, like an AB, like that.
Yeah.
So there's 14 days between body parts.
And I guess that's a way to keep a client coming through the door once a week. I can't imagine that upper body or lower body musculature requires a 14-day recovery period. I mean, that's really moving into the extremes now. And I just don't think that there's a need for to go through a split routine. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of split routines. I think that they can work well if there are other adaptations. Luke's a marathon runner, a basketball player, and I'm a basketball player and a cyclist, and obviously yourself, Lawrence. So if there's times that we're playing basketball and there's a lot of lower body stress happening as a product of that, then an upper body workout the day of, the day before, the day after might be worthwhile, and then a lower body workout later in the week, and then maybe a full body workout later in the week. There's reasons why we might use those. I just don't think that a plateau would make sense. The only thing that wasn't answered in all of that is if somebody is in a plateau, then again, what's the metric by which they're in a plateau? So if they're in a plateau for strength for their chest press or overhead press, I'm going to stick with the same examples as before, is that at the start of the workout? So are they doing that exercise under greater fatigue if it's later in the workout and so forth, and therefore they're not focusing? If my goal is, I don't know, bicep size, is my bicep curl at the start of the workout? Have I got a multi-joint or a single joint bicep exercise at the start of the workout where I'm focusing on that and where I'm looking to optimize that adaptation? So I think that's sort of the next trap that we fall into. We sort of look at a metric, but we're not doing everything to optimize that metric within a workout. I had another point and I can't think what. Oh, yeah. If I was to change anything within a workout, I would increase load. So I think we often fall into the trap of somebody has reached a plateau with strength. Let's add in, or let's make whatever changes we make. I think the most obvious one is to increase load and decrease repetitions. And my primary reason for doing that is if somebody is in a plateau, then the question mark has to be raised, as Luke said, over the stimulus. Is the stimulus appropriate? Is the stimulus sufficient? And if we increase load, then we can probably have a greater guarantee that the stimulus is sufficient. There's going to be a natural variance in sort of repetitions to be performed at a given load. And if you decrease the load down to sort of a 20 rep range, then, on any given day, somebody might get between 18 and 22 reps. Whereas if you decrease the load down to a 5 to 6 rep range, you're naturally looking at a lower range in possible repetitions. So I would do that. And again, exactly like Luke said, I think increasing the load then allows for forced reps, which really has a greater emphasis on the eccentric or the lowering, because the lifting phase is, supported by a trainer, but the lowering should be managed by the trainee independently. So, we then add that, heavy eccentric stimulus as well. Everything else that we add, it's ironic that we often talk about other advanced training, advanced overload techniques, even with forced reps or breakdown sets. What do? They just add volume. They don't fundamentally add effort, because if you've truly reached failure, the effort has been 100%. So we're maybe increasing eccentric effort, but actually what we're probably doing is we're probably adding volume if we're adding in breakdown sets or so forth. So I think that we can go down that path, but we should do that cautiously, especially if we're falling into the trap of, I'm going to reduce your workouts to one workout every 10 days, but I'm going to add in breakdown sets, and I'm going to add in pre and post exhaust, and I'm going to make whatever other changes. So there's a few pointers in there, but I don't think split routines is a solution, in my opinion.
James, I'll echo what you said and just get a little bit more technical. My absolute 2 favorite go-to weeks to a program, if I'm plateauing or a client's plateauing, it's what we call a 1x4 heavy breakdown. So you're trying to fail at 4 reps and 2-4 cadence. So kind of in the high intensity training world, that's a heavy load, 4 reps. And then when you fail, we break it down, try to do 4 more reps, break it down, try to do 4 reps. But the only thing we're actually recording there is, how many reps did you get with that initial weight? So it's a very heavy weight, 4 reps is the goal. I did that in a workout yesterday with a pendulum pull down, 4 reps, and then a breakdown, then a breakdown. That's one of my favorites. My other favorite is just a straight negative only on any exercise where it's practical. Negatively chin up, a negatively dip, and negatively lateral raise, negatively, a number of exercises. Those are my 2 kind of favorite go-tos.
Harks back to what you did to me on the virtual workout in my studio, Luke, with the pull down, did the 4 rep heavy breakdown set it to 440. And I looked at the camera like, Luke, are you kidding me? And I managed it, actually. You sort of shocked myself, surprised myself. It was really, really fun, really good workout. So thank you, guys. That was really, really good insights. Really appreciate the comments. I think this has been so helpful, certainly been massively helpful to me. I'm sure it's been really helpful to listeners. Luke, I just had really one final question here, probably before we wrap up. I think this is absolutely key and something we've not really spoken about too much, maybe danced around a little bit, is how do you think about the messaging around the plateau to keep the client motivated and obviously retain them, even when their strength is sort of naturally hitting that physiological limit? I know we've talked about the nuances of what a plateau means, but let's just keep it, I guess, simple. Say we're there. How do you communicate the client? Yeah.
The first thing we say is, well, if you weren't training, this is what your progress would look like, right? You would be, going in the wrong direction, and you have increased for X number of months or X number of years, and now you're plateauing. But let's draw the line out for a while. This is, look at this, the delta is massive, right? Where you would be relative to where you are right now. So this plateau you're experiencing is just maintaining previous significant progress. Maintaining previous significant progress is awesome, right? In any field or any endeavor. So of course we have to fight to improve in order to maintain. And I think that's worth saying. There's no such thing as a maintenance program. We are fighting to improve in order to maintain, but that delta is pretty significant. And the next thing we will always say is, well, there's only, a few areas that we can actually measure this progress. We're measuring your strength in your current workouts, meaning reps and weight. And we're measuring your strength in this progress assessment workout, meaning reps and weight, standardized exercises. And maybe we're using a bod pod, which is good for body composition, pretty crude for lean tissue. And if someone ever really asks, I say, hey, this is still crude for lean tissue. But then there's like architectural changes to a muscle and there's cognitive benefits and cardiovascular benefits. And I say, I know we didn't see any increase in muscle hypertrophy or lean tissue in the bod pod, but I guarantee there's a change to your muscle architecture. I guarantee if we could actually do ultrasound, there's actually a change to your tissue here. We just don't have sensitive enough measures to assess that. And then again, I'll try to layer in the other health related benefits of resistance training. I don't have a way right now of measuring the pliability of your arteries, but I'm guessing that's improving as well. And I think a lot of those things are just as important as strength and hypertrophy. Now, I'm not going to share that if I'm training someone to be the next Mr. Olympia, right? He's like, hey, or she is only here for hypertrophy, just going to speak to hypertrophy. But our average client is interested in all of it. They're unaware of all those other benefits. So we have to continue to say, we're moving in the right direction on those other benefits as well. We just don't have sophisticated measures to understand, or are we improving all these areas, from profile of mood states, which is a common way to assess, emotional or mental responses to any exercise program. There's just a lot of positive outcomes that we're not assessing.
Yeah, good point. James, any final thoughts before we start wrapping up here?
I was just going to touch on something Luke said. Luke used the word maintaining. I think the one thing we talk about with the plateau is people falling into a maintenance phase. And when people talk about periodization, they talk about phases of training, I find it, I just don't agree with the very limited research that supports it. There's plenty of research that doesn't support it. And when people reach a plateau and they kind of in their head go, okay, I'm in a maintenance phase, what inevitably happens is they go into a negative phase. They lose strength, they add body fat, they lose muscle mass, they start to have negative adaptations or start to lose some of the adaptations that they've had, excuse me. So I think that whilst we've talked about the inevitability of a plateau, and we've talked about ways to potentially break through it or to potentially kind of optimize other things, I think the key thing is to keep fighting through it, is to keep trying to progress. I think we should be very focused on the stimulus itself. Is our training really as maximal as it can be, as optimal as it can be? Is the stimulus sufficient? Don't fall into the trap of going, okay, I got 10 reps out last time. As long as I get 10 reps out this time, that's fine. Because as soon as we fall into that 3 workouts down the line, we go, oh, I only got 9 reps. That's okay. That's still pretty good. And it's easy to get into okay, things have slipped a little bit. I've added 5 pounds of body fat. I'm lifting 10 pounds less on a leg press. And then, of course, what happens is we refocus on our workout. We make those adaptations again, and we think we've made increases, but actually all we've done is attain what we previously attained. So we should absolutely celebrate a plateau, like Luke said. It shows that we've made great progress. And the longer that we can maintain a plateau, the better. The longer that we can keep fighting against it, the better. But we shouldn't sort of give into it.
Yeah, love it. Great point. Great point to finish on. Thank you both for your time today. Really enjoyed this as always. It's great to get you both on together. It's been a while. It's been at least probably 6 months to a year, maybe longer. I guess for everyone interested in yourself, Luke, it's discoverstrength.com, discoverstrengthfranchise.com. Are those the best places?
Yes, sir.
Good stuff. And James, what's your email address again? That's normally the thing you like to leave, isn't it?
Yeah, it's james.fisher@solent.ac.uk. That's Solent is SOLENT.ac.uk. And I will reply to all emails.
Great. Thank you. And I think it's also probably good to mention that the three of us did a really interesting mini series some time back. We talked about all sorts of things like training frequency and volume again, and tracking. And I'll link to those in the show notes, because if you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoy listening to James and Luke, then we've done lots of content together on the podcast, and I think you'll really enjoy the other episodes also. Again, please leave a review on iTunes. Really helps the podcast grow, helps more people learn about HIIT and build a HIIT business. So if you're passionate about those things, please do leave a review. Obviously 5 stars. Otherwise, we might try and delete it. I don't know if you can actually do that. So I don't know why I said that. And to get more clients for your high intensity training business, please download our free anti-aging and strength training sales presentation, which actually was sent to me by the person who emailed the questions for today. So I won't name the person, because obviously, we've been pulling some of those questions apart, but they know who they are, and I really appreciate you. You can use this presentation for your next speaking engagement or client seminar to convert more leads and retain more clients. Download now over at highintensitybusiness.com/free. That's FREE. And you'll also get access to lots more goodies as well. highintensitybusiness.com/free. And finally, to find the blog post for this episode, please go to highintensitybusiness.com and search episode 415. And until next time, thank you very much for listening. This episode is brought to you by Imagine Strength, your go-to for safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training equipment. Growing a successful high-intensity training business requires workout equipment that's not only high quality, but also intelligently designed to fit the unique needs of your studio. And that's where Imagine Strength comes in. Drawing on the wisdom of the legendary Arthur Jones, Imagine Strength has crafted a groundbreaking line of fitness equipment that's as affordable as it is efficient, giving your studio the upgrade it needs without breaking the bank. The team at Imagine Strength breathes HIIT. Their passion for high-intensity training shines through in their designs, which they've consistently refined and innovated for optimum effectiveness and user experience. From my personal experience at Rec, I can attest to the careful consideration and craftsmanship that goes into every single piece. My Imagine Strength workout was absolutely brutal, in a good way, of course. Now, what makes Imagine Strength truly stand out? They have innovative equipment tailored for the unique needs of HIIT studios, affordable and efficient designs, lowering the barriers to entry for a HIIT business, continuous innovation and refinement ensuring your studio stays ahead of the curve. Founder Jeff Turner and his team are dedicated to moving the HIIT industry forward and making strength training accessible to more people than ever before. Here's how you get started. Number 1, visit imaginestrength.com. Number 2, discuss your specific needs with the team. And number 3, select the equipment that will propel your business to the next level. Head to imaginestrength.com today and give your HIIT business the Imagine Strength edge. Be part of the HIIT revolution and see firsthand how their unique equipment can transform your studio's workout experience. Elevate your HIIT business with Imagine Strength.